Good afternoon. I want to thank you all for attending our meeting today on Cedar. I'm really excited about all of you that are here. It's probably too bad that we have to be here for this situation, but I think the meeting discussion will be very productive to you. Hopefully it'll give you something to take home and consider. What we're going to talk about today, of course, is the Cedar invasion along the Missouri River. We're going to have some rancher perspectives, and a lot of you can probably speak to that yourself. We're going to talk about the James River. We recognize that there's a problem starting here as well. We're going to talk about some cedar control methods, as well as an introduction to prescribed burning, and a little bit about funding potential. And we're going to, at the end, we're going to kind of wrap up with where do we go from here, and that's where the challenge is out to you to determine where do you want to go from here. If you recognize that there is a problem, where do you want to go from here? So I think what we're going to do is we're going to start out with a video as an introductory to the rest of the program. So sit back and enjoy this about a 4-minute video, and then we'll reconvene.
This country is made for cows. You couldn't do anything else down in here. Cows are kind of our way of life. These hills, this is what they're made for. These cattle need to graze here. We're losing a lot of grazing land to cedar trees. Back in 2012, 30% of Gregory County was covered in cedar trees.
A few years ago, you could run 10 cows in an area where now you can only run 3, so that's how much we've lost in the last few years.
We started thinking about putting a burn association together to get rid of cedar trees. We started the tree shearing a little bit, working with NRCS to cut and stuff trees down in the canyons.
And try to reclaim some of our grazing land.
We started with a few small controlled burns several years ago. We did a couple of, I would call them experimental burns.
We got what we call a prescription, and you got to kind of follow that pretty much to the letter. We contact neighbors, fire departments.
The last burn we did, we had 25 people here.
We had grass rigs, UTVs, ATVs, and igniters, and you got to kind of train them and watch them as you go, you know.
Nobody really cares to write a burn plan, but a burn plan is required, especially in our new association, the Mid-Missouri River Prescribed Burn Association. We are members of that. We helped start that about a little over a year ago, and it is the first burn association in South Dakota. The key is to be safe and to follow prescription. You just don't go out and light a fire. There's a lot of planning that goes along with it. This was one of our most successful burn areas, wasn't it?
This draw here, we used to gather cattle up out of here. We would gather them coming around, and they would come up into these areas, and you had to get down on your hands and knees to bring cattle out of here. And you never did get them all anyway. As you can see, we cleaned up a lot of country here. Now we got grasses that are working its way under where we sheared them trees and burned them. Now that's filling back in with native grasses, and that's kind of what we're after.
Today's date is the 24th of April, and on April 8th is when we did our burn. And you can see that green growth coming. They said that the Native Americans would burn off the prairie so the buffalo would come back and graze all of that. They just used to burn it off all the time. We've got 40 or 50 years of putting fires out and bringing trees into our area, not knowing that the eastern red cedar probably should be a noxious weed. That eastern red cedar is just coming up this river, and we really need to be on top of it and do something before. Look at these big trees, you know, before you've got years and years of cedar trees that are choking the grasses out. It's expensive to do what we are doing, but we hope for the future that it will pay back.
We need to produce more than we ever have, you know, to feed the world. If we can increase our stocking rates and take care of our land a little better, I think we're doing our job.
that was a good example of some producers who are actively trying their best to manage a problem on their grazing lands. That video was put together by the South Dakota Grasslands Coalition along with NRCS and a number of partners. Very well done video. We're going to move right into this program. My name is Rod Voss, and I'm a rangeland management specialist with the Natural Resources Conservation Service out of Mitchell. And I actually service this area all the way down to Yankton and then off over towards the winter area and then back up to Mitchell. So I kind of have a vested interest in this area, and that's why I'm involved with helping put this program together. Why is there a problem with the cedar here? First, a little discussion about the cedar tree. Well, the cedar is not actually a cedar. It is actually a member of the juniper family. It is a dioecious plant, meaning it has individual male and female plants. And growth, when the tree gets taller, it can put on 1/2 to 1.5 feet per year. But some of the research that Dr. Sandy Smart is doing at SDSU has found that these little tiny cedars may actually be only 6 and 7 years old. So they start very slow, but when they get going, get a little older, that's when you start to see a spike in their growth potential. They photosynthesize much longer than a deciduous tree. Down to 40 degrees, they're going to be actively growing and photosynthesizing. So as the soils begin to warm up now here in the spring, they're going to start becoming active. They have a great potential to use a lot of water, 7 to 40 gallons a day. And you can about imagine when you look out across the landscape and you see a lot of cedar trees out there, what the potential is for their use in that subsoil moisture. The Rocky Mountain juniper, which is a close relative, also uses a lot of water and is also a problem in a lot of our western states. The cedar also, over the years, has been identified to have food and medicinal values, and of course wood values. Everybody has seen a nice cedar chest or trunk, and Christmas trees. So if we look at the prairie, and everybody knows that we live in the prairie, but why do we have the prairie? What were the drivers that made the prairie? Well, the 3 big drivers of the native prairie was our climate, the grazing animal, and fire. Okay, so if we look back a couple hundred years ago, we know that there were large herds of bison roaming the prairie, and we know that fire was a major component to the prairie, and it kept the woody species out. In fact, some of the research shows that in the tallgrass prairie, about 1/3 of it burned every single year, and all of it burned at least every 3 years. I'm kind of a history buff, and I've read several of the Lewis and Clark version of the journal, and here's a couple excerpts from the journal. And the location where they were here was after winter camp the first year on 6th of March, 1805, they said it was a cloudy morning, smoky all day from the burning of the plains, which was set on fire by the Minataris for an early crop of grass. Then again on 30th of March, 20-some days later, they write that the plains are on fire in view of the fort on both sides of the river. It is said to be common for the Indians to burn the plains near the villages every spring for the benefit of their horses and to induce the buffalo to come near to them. And in fact, I remember reading in the books that basically it was not uncommon for there to be journal entries basically from Omaha all the way up to the Bismarck area where they noted that they saw smoke in the air on that entire journey north. So then along comes settlement and the fires were put out. In fact, the pioneers feared them, and for good reason, it wasn't without reason. But then we started to plant cedars in our windbreaks for protection for our homes and for our livestock, and actually a lot of people plant them for wildlife habitat. As the number of trees increase, the wildlife actually can move those seeds around. The cedar is a very adaptable species. It can be found on very thin soils to fairly wet, very healthy, good, deep soils. And so what we've found is that it's kind of a generational problem. It's not a problem that shows up overnight. It occurs over a generation. If we look to the south, in July of 2002, the Oklahoma State Technical Committee declared juniper encroachment as Oklahoma's #1 natural resource concern. So that took precedence over soil erosion, water quality issues, all the other potential resource concerns. They identified cedar as their #1 concern. And so they formed a task force. The result from that task force was that over $218 million annually was lost due to the loss of forage, wildfire, lease hunting, recreation, and water yield. If we come up a little further north, about 18 years later, basically Nebraska's looking at the same issue. And in fact, Duroc Twidwell, professor at University of Nebraska, trees in rangeland are now approaching 1 million acres, and Nebraska is considered to be in the early stages of the transition process. The transition he's talking about is a transition from grass to forest. Bring this closer to home, we'll take a look at Gregory County, where the video was filmed, and we're pushing 30% encroachment. So what's being done? Well, there's a fair bit of mechanical control effort being done in Charles Mix County since 2015. There have been about 1,200 acres in Charles Mix, 2,100 in Brule and Buffalo, 4,200 acres in Gregory County, and nearly 600 in Lyman County. And that doesn't account for private individuals who are out there just doing it on their own. This is actually what we have some records for. This is a map along the Missouri River somewhere west of Yankton here in 2004. And what's interesting here, if you kind of focus on this area right here, and I don't know where this land is exactly, but I think that picture was taken in about 2016. So a lot of land clearing occurred there. Not land clearing, but cedar control. So in 2015, the Middle Missouri River Prescribed Burn Association was formed as a result of the concern for all the cedar encroachment. And they've been very active and involved with utilizing prescribed burning. In 2017, almost 700 acres were burned. In 2018, 217 acres. Last year with the wet conditions was a little more difficult for them. They are cooperating with SDSU on a grant within RCS where they're writing 6,000 acres in burn plans, and they plan to apply 6,000 acres of prescribed burning over the next several years. In the James River Valley, the Davison Conservation District is doing mechanical control in those particular counties. Now, the majority of that work is Davison, but there's a number of these other counties that are also having some control done, but they've also done a lot of acres of cedar control. And what I want you to look at here is just, you can see this picture was taken along the James River Valley. It was a March picture. You can see the deciduous trees, they have not leafed out yet, but all the green along the side, those are all cedar. A picture from 1964, just take a brief look at the circled areas, and then in 2018. So you can see this creep of cedar coming out of the draws. So when you drive down the road, this might be what you see, a scattered tree here and there, maybe a taller tree. What you don't always see from the road is these little tiny ones. And I've heard it say that for every one you see, there's 6 to 10 little ones, okay? So kind of bear that in mind. Pretty soon you start seeing a few more trees, but you're maybe not really getting concerned. You might have 10 to 15% canopy cover from those trees. Pretty soon, before you know it, you might have a hillside or landscape where up to 30-35% canopy cover by those big, taller trees. And as we mentioned earlier, as they get taller, they kind of grow faster. So going back to Duroc Twidwell said it very well here, prevention is the key to effectively deal with invasive species. Policy for eastern red cedar has never addressed this issue, causing agencies to underinvest when the problem was preventable and overinvest later on in an attempt to restore what was lost. There are no examples where this mentality has worked long-term for eastern red cedar. So what is the Southern Plains doing about it? Well, here's a map done by Kansas Forest Service. Each of those red areas represents a burn association that has formed over the past 20 to 30 years. And you can see that those burn associations are pretty well following these river systems north. We know we've got a problem. We're starting to get a problem here, but now is the time to act on that. And this is kind of a fun picture of a guy using a drip torch off a horse here. That's kind of the wrap up of my presentation. Do we have any questions?